Star Wars is finally going back to the movie theaters, and this new Star Wars movie is a topic of concern, question, and contention for fans. The story of the creation of this film is actually more interesting than most of the stories we get in Star Wars canon projects these days.
Got him!
Damon Lindleof, the guy that was hired to write this movie, worked on it for over a year before being fired by Kathleen Kennedy just weeks before she went to Star Wars Celebration and announced that Steve Knight was writing this movie and that the script for the film would be done about 6 weeks from now. And new reports are sharing even more information about what exactly was going on with this process, why Damon Lindleof was fired from his Star Wars project, and we even have details about what was in his script. So I want to talk about these updates. I want to tell you what Damon Lindleof said about his experience working on Star Wars. Then I want to talk to you about the new reports about what was going to be in his Star Wars movie, and I really want to tell you why I think it would have been much better than what they're doing now. And then after that, we're going to speculate on why this is all going down and might end in a glorious disaster. Smash a freaking like on this video and let's begin. Okay, so first up, I think it's valuable here to sort of give you the TLDR on what's been going on with this movie. Long before Kathleen Kennedy went on the stage at Star Wars Celebration to talk about the Star Wars films, we had been getting reports that they were working on a movie for 2025. And almost immediately, and this is very important here, almost immediately with the reports of making this movie came with it reports that Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm was hell-bent on making this movie, that nothing was going to get in their way, and after losing many other directors and watching many film projects fall by the wayside, they were now completely committed to making this movie in 2025. And one of the very first things we heard about this movie was that it was Damon Lindelof's idea, that he had pitched an idea to Lucasfilm for a Star Wars project. That pitch was accepted, and then Lucasfilm built an entire writer's room around Damon Lindelof that included Dave Filoni, and he worked on this script with his partner for over a year. Now, a little bit before Star Wars Celebration, Jeff Snyder reported that Lindelof had been fired, or I guess at the time it was just reported that he had left the project, that essentially he turned in a script, and just days later, Lucasfilm said they weren't going to be able to work this out with him. And this seemed to be confirmed when the trades reported about it, and then weeks later at Star Wars Celebration, no mention of Lindelof at all, but Kathleen Kennedy did mention Steve Knight as the writer for the Charmaine Obed-Chinoy movie, which was going to have a heavy focus on Rey, Daisy Ridley. She came out on stage and, well, there were mixed reactions. Well, recently, Damon Lindelof came out and talked about how he wasn't just in talks to join the Star Wars universe. He was in the Star Wars universe. So he said this to Esquire. He said, "I was in more than talks to join the Star Wars universe. I joined the Star Wars universe and was asked to leave." Now, he left out the specifics of what had happened to cause this rift, like why Kathy asked him to leave, but we have that info too. I'm going to go over that in just a second. But I want to note here that Lindelof finished up by saying, "Will I get back in line outside the club and try to get back in again? Absolutely. If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. Or again try, as Yoda would say." Yoda would say do or do not. There is no try, but okay. The point being, Lindelof was asked to leave, but he seems to be willing to come back to Star Wars. He definitely loves Star Wars, as he mentioned in other interviews, and I think he wants to come back. Now, the reason this is important is because it shows that he was majorly attached to this project. He was more than just in talks. He was in the universe. And again, we have reports that they built a writer's room around this guy, and Lindelof was the name. He was going to be the big draw to this film. So why didn't he get the job? Why did they reject his script after accepting his pitch? Well, there's some new information coming out from insider Jeff Snyder about a particular element that was in Lindelof's movie that may have been the sticking point. According to Jeff, his movie, Lindelof's, was going to take place 60 years after the rise of Skywalker, and there was going to be an older Rey who was going to be training two different Jedi. Apparently, Helen Mirren was the type that they were going to go after for an older Rey, although apparently they never officially officially reached out to her. So, important to note here, Daisy Ridley obviously was not going to be attached to that movie, and the vision that Lindelof had for his movie was going to be using Rey as a much older person, a wise, older Jedi Master, maybe finally understanding that before she goes, she should probably try to restart the Jedi Order. Now, in the Above the Line podcast where Jeff dropped this information, he and John Roca were talking about this, and he revealed that bringing Daisy Ridley on for this movie, for the Charmin Obed-Chinoy film, was something of a last-minute decision. And so it seems like that came together kind of last minute, even though they had been having some conversations over the years. And so it could very well be the case that Lindelof's film was something that Kathy wanted to do. She thought it was a good idea because she accepted the pitch. But then once she realized she could actually get Daisy Ridley back, she basically abandoned that idea and instead wanted to write a film all about a younger Rey. We know now that this movie is going to take place 15 years after the rise of Skywalker. So Lindelof's film would have been 4 times as long as far as the distance in between the rise of Skywalker and the start of the movie. But before we get into more speculating on like why this all fell apart and some of the shady stuff that could be going on over at Lucasfilm with regards to this movie, I just want to say that this seems to be the thing with Star Wars, that projects and writers that get fired, we hear things about their pitches and about their projects, and we all say, well, that actually sounds pretty cool. Like, I remember when the Duel of the Fates script leaked. This was the movie that Colin Trevorrow was going to make for episode 9. He gets fired. They bring back JJ to do it. And people went crazy for that Duel of the Fates script. A lot of Star Wars fans felt like that would have been a much better movie than what you got in The Rise of Skywalker, which frankly wouldn't be difficult. The Rise of Skywalker is like a total doo-doo pile of a film. But at the same time, like, there's some whack stuff in that script too. I didn't love it as much as other people did, but it definitely had more of a Star Wars vibe and more emotion in it. I say all of that to say, I think a similar thing is happening here with the Lindelof script, where a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, damn, that's kind of cool. I would have liked to see that. And they're unfortunately going to hold that against this new film. And also, I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people. I prefer the 60-year-old Rey or the much older Rey. Because to me, if you're going to acknowledge the sequel trilogy, if you're going to use the character of Rey and try to like have a baton passing moment, I think it's actually good to do that way down the line. The depiction of a much more older, confident, mature Rey, I really think that would show a dimension of the character and honestly so much growth that a lot of fans that didn't like Daisy Ridley's depiction of Rey in the sequel trilogy might be a little bit more open to it. I also think just for the brand of Star Wars, this would have been a much better move because going way into the future just gives you a chance to explore a whole bunch of new ideas. There's a mystery as to what the galaxy is going to be looking like that far into the future. Who are the villains? Are there new dark side users? Are there new Jedi? How have the characters that we knew during the sequel trilogy grown and changed? And which one of them are even still alive? These are really interesting questions. I think this would have been a much better setting for the fan base. Instead, by using Daisy Ridley again, you're going to really associate people to the sequel trilogy, which a lot of people just frankly do not like. And I also think it feels so weird to just go back to Daisy Ridley a mere 6 years after her trilogy. Like, there's not even really enough time for it to hit in a nostalgic way. It's just going to feel like an extension of the sequel trilogy. It's, for all intents and purposes, going to be looked at as episode 10. So I personally would have loved to go way in the future. I love the idea of a much older Rey, and I think it would have been better for the brand of Star Wars if they went that direction. But definitely let me know what you think about that in the comment section. But now I want to speculate. I want to be clear. This is speculation here, but I think it's crazy that Kathleen Kennedy would get Damon Lindleof, a freaking name, a brand, a really well-known dude, and he pitches her this idea. She accepts it. Like, there's a scenario here where Kathleen Kennedy was like, yes, that seems like the move. That could absolutely work. And yet, she's also having conversations with Daisy Ridley and seemingly thinking about what she could do with the film with Daisy Ridley if Daisy came back. And there's other weirdness to this story, like the fact that Lindelof had no idea that Charmin was hired to be the director of that film. And then Lucasfilm really quickly replaces Lindelof with Steve Knight, which leads me to believe they were already in talks with him to perhaps take over for this movie. Now, there's a couple of things operating here that are really weird. Like, it's possible that Kathleen was using Lindelof and the idea of Rey being an old lady to sort of leverage Daisy Ridley into coming back. So maybe Daisy was skeptical of coming back to Star Wars, and Kathleen Kennedy said, well, I'm going to do stuff with Rey regardless. And if you don't come back, I'm going to go 60 years into the future, and then there's really no scenario in which you can come back until you get much, much older. Like, maybe she always wanted Daisy to come back, and she kind of just used this writer's room, used Damon Lindelof to leverage that. But I actually think it's more like just incompetence. It's more like she just didn't know what to do. And even though there was this really great writer who had a really cool idea that they built an entire writer's room around, in the back of her mind, Kathleen Kennedy's just like, yeah, well, what if we didn't do that and just brought Daisy Ridley back as Rey? And there are other considerations here. I mean, there's toy sales, there's branding. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy probably wants Rey to be significant again to try to leverage selling more Rey merchandise, putting Rey in more things like the theme parks or the cruises. It's like her doubling down on her creation, her time period of taking over Star Wars. And I frankly can't help but think that that's the logic that took her to make this decision. But of course, we don't really know the full story on this. That's a lot of speculation. I think it's well-informed speculation at this point, but it is just speculation. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Smash a like on this video if you liked it. And if you want to watch more, why not check out this video I just made all about the box office tracking for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and why Marvel might be in trouble.